And welcome to our Women in Leadership webinar. I'm Fabiola Guerra and I work for Mahindra. And today we will have a very strong and powerful group of women talking about the ripple effect. With us, we have Marcie Jastrow, Chief Revenue Officer, Evercast, and formerly at Technicolor. Nanea Reeves, CEO and co-founder at TRIPP, and Barbara Marshall, Industry Strategy and Marketing, Media and Entertainment at HP. They will give us a different point of view, making this event more interesting and dynamic, and what it means to them professionally as well as personally. Feel free to chat with us and share your opinions. And if you have any questions for our panelists, drop them in our Q&A window. And now we are happy to introduce our passionate and energetic moderator, Menin, and our anchor and active host, Sumit Grover. Over to you, Sumit.
Thank you so much, Fabi. Well, I have to say it was so good to see you earlier this week. I do want you to know, Fabi, that you definitely have a ripple effect on people that you meet. You bring such positivity and genuine interaction that when people go on in their day after meeting you, the positive ripple effect continues. So thank you for giving me that this Monday. Well, everybody, good day. I really hope you and all yours are safe and healthy. I'm Sumit, your host for the day, and really thrilled to be with all of you here. This time of the year and the topic of today's show are quite synonymous, being thankful. So let me first wish everyone a very happy and safe Thanksgiving, and hope today's interaction with these amazing and inspiring leaders sets the tone for the holiday season. Would also like to thank our audience for tuning in on another Friday. We know you have a lot of other options, and we truly appreciate you choosing to share your time with us. It is my privilege to learn about the life stories and instances that created life-changing ripple effects on our elite panelist lives. Welcome, Marcie, Nanea, and Barbara, and thank you again for sharing your nuggets of wisdom with our ever-growing and engaging audience. Because Thanksgiving is more than one day. For all those who've tuned in, this is purely voluntary. Please do check out the link in the chat that Ashmeet is sharing now. It is about an initiative where you can also join us by giving a gift of education to a young girl. This program is designed to support girls from low-income families, which allows them to complete 10 years of their formal school education. This is a Mahindra Foundation project, which so far has impacted lives of over 450,000 young girls. We call them Nanhi Kalis, from underserved communities across all of India. So if you're still thinking of what to gift to your loved ones this Thanksgiving, do consider sponsoring a young girl, her dreams by being a positive ripple today. That brings me to the topic, ripple effect. Like a pebble in a pond creates ripples, our actions and decisions create waves that give a new direction to our life every step of the way. Marcie, Nanea, and Barbara will share their perspectives on this phenomenon and what it means to them professionally and personally, as we learn from their life experiences and the influence of ripples encountered in their lives. So without further ado, here's to the women who forged a path, mentored others, and created a voice for those who didn't have a platform. Let's kick it off with our very own fearless and fabulous Debbie Menin.
Debbie, you're on mute.
Did it work? Are we good? Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, perfect. You just heard Sumit talk about throwing a pebble in a lake. What is a wonder is to watch the beauty that takes place. I think we've all seen it. I was actually at a Disney golf tournament in Orlando, and it wasn't a pebble in a lake, but it was actually an alligator in a lagoon. And the ripple effect that took place was phenomenal, but it was kind of exciting to watch. But it's interesting to think about what this really means. It's basically a multiplier of one's actions. And we do know that actions always have a reaction or a consequence. Now, that could be good or bad. So today we're going to talk about how these three women have led change for good. And my thinking is, by the end of this session, may we all think differently about our actions and the results that can come from it, from a positive impact on society, industry, our friends, our family, etc. So before we get started, I think it's important for me to acknowledge how I know these three rock solid women. So Marcie and Nanea were both given a very well-deserved Distinguished Women in Technology Award through the Advanced Imaging Society, where I used to work. Now, I have to say that it was the most heartfelt event I have ever attended. Each recipient accepted their award with such gracious and authentic way. I have to say there was no dry eye in the audience. So Nanea, do you have your there you go. And you can see right behind Marcie, you can see her award. And here it is. Let me just say this was very, very well deserved. And I also want to say how I know Barbara. She was there actually presenting one of these awards, but I've also listened to her for many years. She's always on panels with thought-provoking discussions on the industry. So we're really honored to have these three exceptional women today, but I think to do everyone justice, it's important to talk about the family background and the impact that it made. I think that'll help set the stage. But think about the fact that everybody is not created equal, but there is one thing in common with these three ladies. They have all risen to exceptional levels of success. It had to start somewhere though. And so I'm just going to pick on Barbara first. So Barbara, you told me that your great-grandma, mom, not mom, and father have influenced you and instilled some life lessons. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind telling us what they were. Now, Barbara, guess what? You're on mute. And in fact, all of us are probably on mute. There you go.
We've all automatically been put on mute.
Yes.
Thank you. So hi, everybody. Thank you for having me, Debbie. This is a great honor to be part of this conversation. So yeah, I mean, we're all products of our upbringing, aren't we? For better or worse. And one of the things that I think we all have a choice about, regardless of where we come from, we have a choice what we bring forward into life and what we choose to leave behind. I was very fortunate because I did have like really supportive parents. They themselves didn't necessarily come from the easiest of backgrounds. My mum in particular had a terrible life. She was orphaned at 4, put into an Irish orphanage. She was fostered, abused, sent to boarding school. You know, she had nobody in her life. She had no role models. So her experience as a mother was she was just kind of feeling around. But for me, I was very lucky because she did impart some really pearls of wisdom that I've carried through with me. And one of the things that I just remember her telling me, I think I was just leaving home for work, you know, for the first time, leaving home for the first time. And she said, Barbara, remember to be nice to people on the way up because you never know who you're going to meet on the way down. And I think that really taught me and built on what she taught me throughout my childhood, to be nice to people. There's no excuse not to be nice and to be humble, because you don't know what's going to happen in future. The intern that's working for you 1 minute might end up being your boss in years to come. So that to me was a really profound piece of advice that I've kept or tried to keep with me. Another piece of advice, my father came from a more conventional background. He was an engineer. Again, I was very lucky because I had an engineer as a father, and he just treated me as a mini adult. There was no question of me being able to do whatever I wanted to do. Whatever I wanted to do, my parents supported me. The thing that I really carry with me from him is, Barbara, if a job is worth doing, it's worth doing well. And I think he taught my sister and I that when we were learning to do housework around the house. But it's just as applicable to everyday life and our job as it is to doing housework. And then you mentioned my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother was an amazing lady. This is obviously on my father's side because my mum was an orphan. She lived to 104 and was born in 1883 and died in 1987. So I had a really good relationship with her, you know, as a teenager, and really got to know her. To be able to talk to her about Queen Victoria was pretty amazing. So she's a real inspiration. I later found out that when her husband died in the 30s, I guess it was 20s, leaving her with 4 children, she had to go to court to claim ownership of the property and business that her husband had bought for her, knowing he was dying. He had bought her business to help support her because he knew he wouldn't be there anymore. But in those days, women were not allowed to own property, were not allowed to own businesses. So she had to go to court to fight for her right. She obviously won.
Good for her.
She went to college at the turn of the century. She went to Oxford to train as a teacher. So a real inspiration. She was slightly scary, I have to say, when I was little. But, as I got to know her as I grew older, just fascinating to have such a role model in my life.
Yeah, keep calm and carry on, right? That's what she had to do. She didn't have a choice. Well, thanks, Barbara. Appreciate it. Marcie, we're going to jump to you for a second. Now, here's my thought on Marcie. She has a great family that made a big impact on her, but really in a different way that I think you're going to expect. So my question for her is one that the audience will find fascinating. Why did you not fall into your father's footsteps and allow him to take you under his wing? This will be interesting. This will be good.
So my father and my mother both were very successful people. My mother was the first senior vice president of stores for a department store called Robinson's. And my father was the president of the studio group for Paramount Pictures. I went to Fashion Institute, and so I thought I was going to go into not into the entertainment industry. I was going to go into the fashion industry and be a buyer. I ultimately wanted to have my own department store. But what happened was, through a series of many different events, I fell into post-production. And I literally fell into post-production. I worked for a man named Paul Hager. And when you're in the industry is super small. It's not a very large industry. And there's a lot of nepotism, and that's what you heard all the time. Who are you? Who's your father? Who's your mother? Who's your aunt? Who's your uncle? How do you get the job? And so I really wanted to do it on my own, and I wanted to understand how to do that. So the minute I got married, I changed my name to my married name, which is Jastrow. And I really wanted to do everything on my own. I wanted to make my own clients. I wanted to create my own legacy. I wanted to create all of that. And I think it was mainly because I felt like I wouldn't be as successful if I had to explain who my father was. And so I wanted to be an adult. I wanted to be able to do it all on my own. And that's why I did it. I still took advice. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely listened and watched and understood the studio system probably better than most, because I saw it from the business side, not just from the creative side. And I think that through those dinner table chats prior to me actually being in the entertainment industry, I absorbed a lot. And from there, I chose post-production mainly because there were 0 women and the opportunity was endless. And you could easily become someone super compelling when you were one of maybe 20 women in the entire industry.
Like, truly admire that you wanted to do it on your own, to create your own legacy. I think everyone here could admire that. So thanks for sharing your story.
Sure.
Nanea, over to you. My thought is I'm not going to even try to describe your family. I'm just going to give it over to you here.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Debbie, and thank you to Barbara and Marcie for sharing their stories. It was, you meet people and you think you feel isolated in your own journey, but everyone has a story to tell. And I sometimes have to pinch myself to think, how did I get here, doing what I'm doing? I definitely did not have supportive parents. My mother struggled with heroin addiction. My father was absent. And I had two younger sisters that I felt a huge sense of responsibility for. And as a very young child, I had to figure out how to deal with some very hard situations. And by the time I was a teenager, early teens, like 13, 14, I was really struggling with the damage of a lot of neglect, a lot of abuse, and exposure to things a lot of children, you would never want your kids to be exposed to. And so I found myself in a mental health, in a psychiatric hospital. And there was a doctor there, a therapist, who was so kind. And I was having a panic attack, and she taught me how to breathe this Tibetan breathing technique that immediately calmed me down. And she saw my reaction to it, and so she taught me how to meditate. And it really, I think that her kindness and awareness, being mindfully aware of how to help this child in peril, it changed the course of my life. And since then, because of the gift of meditation, and this was way before, all these mindfulness apps and everything that's out there, I was actually embarrassed to tell my friends that I meditated. Even by the time I was 16, I had done a 10-day Vipassana retreat. And if anybody attending this call has done that, you know how incredibly challenging that is, but transformative. And we've seen the impact in it being used in some of the prison system in India to great effect. And I found it to be very transformative. And meditation started to rewire my decision framework, but also being able to be open to receiving help. And I had a sister 2 years younger than me, and she passed away in 2012 from a drug overdose. And she went down the path that I was probably most likely to go down as well, had it not been the compassion of that woman to want to support me. I didn't have any money to pay her. And, so you think of the ripple effect. One person can really make a difference in people's lives. One change in your behavior of, being willing to receive help, being open to it, being open to new ideas. I really do believe that that's why I'm here. And my sister's not. She attached to the damage of her experience, which was the same experience I had, but through the gift of being able to pause and not react right away to how I was feeling, I could start to look at how to rewire and reframe my experience. And what I found in that was my childhood, that many would consider, lifelong damage would result from. I was able to reframe it to go, wow, I was a fierce little girl. I dealt with all this stuff and I still survived, and I figured out on my own how to give myself a great life. And, one thing I've found in that is that I'm not special. It's just I was able to change the way I spoke to myself throughout the day. It's such a powerful tool. And then as I, started to build a life, I could see that there were a lot of unique attributes of, that resulted from my background, while I was sitting in a room with everyone who went to Stanford and MIT and, that I had learned by doing, I had learned by working, I had learned on my feet. And that in and of itself, as an operator, I ended up, advancing to chief operating officer because I had done everyone's job. And so, it was me being that little girl trying to figure out how to do hard things has really helped me as an entrepreneur. And so I would just invite anyone who might be struggling with some of these things to, get the support that you need from somebody who knows what they're doing. And because there's different ways to look at things that can actually be very empowering.
Nanea, that story was profound. My hope is people here are listening. It's not about attaching to negativity in your past. It's about what are you going to do about it for your future. And I think you're such a success story, but it's wonderful that you had this therapist that came in and helped you, but it was you are the one who did it. And while we're talking to you, I want to just kind of keep moving into the next question really, which is what are our backgrounds? And I used to work with Nanea when she was the chief operating officer of Machinima, which is a gamer YouTube channel that Warner Media bought. But I want to say that because she was so well respected at the organization that she basically ran, that I was just wondering if you could quickly just tell us about your background.
Sure. So, I started off doing front end coding back in the early days of the internet in Hollywood, actually doing movie marketing sites. And I always found, though, that I was good at communicating corporate strategy into user experience. So I started off as really my career excelled when I went into product management. It was interesting because people always try to push women into marketing, but I had a smart boss who said, you want to own product, you want to own revenue. And so I started aligning my career in that path. And it was a great journey. I ended up in the right place at the right time in mobile gaming, running tech and product, and got acquired by Electronic Arts and ran EA Online for a long time. And I love video games, and I really felt that video games helped me when I was younger feel in control of my environment. So, combining video games with meditation, this idea emerged to create the company that I'm running now, which is TRIPP. One of the things, though, that, working in the games industry, oftentimes I was the only woman in the room. And, so there were some times where I felt unheard, I felt dismissed, I felt talked over. And it really bummed me out. One day I actually packed up my office and was crying in the car, I can't deal with this anymore. And I had to kind of shift my perception of it. And all of a sudden I went, you're a gamer and you're playing this game to lose. How do you win? How do you win at this game? And so what I realized was that there's this perception that a lot of women in business aren't seen as strategic and not as focused on P&L as they should be. At least this is the perception. I don't find that to be true. But what I did was every presentation I did, every idea I had, every slide had a number on it and a strategy for how to drive growth and new revenue. And so I had to shift sort of the bias coming at me with really kind of figuring out how to strategize for me, So I would run tests and show data because you could argue with me and my lady parts, but you couldn't argue with the data. And so that, and learning how to sell my ideas with tests and real results that made people feel comfortable with funding those ideas. And I've worked for a lot of great people, men and women, who really, being open to being teachable, being coachable, really helped me not get defensive and take their advice. So.
Well, Nanea, we'll get into TRIPP in a bit because I do want to talk about it. Thank you. That background is super helpful. Marcie or Barbara, who wants to go next?
Go ahead, Barbara.
So my background is pretty varied. I started my career as a commodity trader, commodity analyst, and then trader. Interesting what you're saying, Nanea, about data. My first job was all about the data. I was analyzing the supply and demand of grains and oilseeds. I was buying US weather data to predict whether the wheat crop was going to be high or low this coming year, and advising traders on whether they should be buying or selling the commodities. I found that quite boring, so I left after 3 years, and I was trading electricity, controlled experiment to see whether it was the job that I found boring or whether it was the environment. And I realized that although my background is economics and I am an analyst by training, I don't want to do that all day, every day. So I went traveling for a year, hoping I would get that bolt from the blue and know what I wanted to be when I grew up, which never happened. So to all those people out there that are questioning what they want to do, it doesn't matter if you don't know. Life can still be really interesting and a journey. And so I got back from my year traveling. It was back in the days when newspapers existed and job pages existed, and I was flicking through the job page and there was a big advert from the BBC. This could be the change of scene you're looking for, which is exactly how I was feeling. Like it seemed to speak to me. And so that's how I got into the last 30 years of my career. I got the job at the BBC. They were going through a semi kind of, not privatization, but they were commercializing the studios and post-production facilities, and they needed people from a commercial environment to help drive that process. And so after the BBC, 7 years at the BBC, then I was where did I go? I went to Broadcast Magazine as a technology editor, and then I joined a PR company and joined Autodesk. Autodesk brought me to Canada. And then from Canada, I ran my own business, and then for 5 years, consulting for technology companies in the media and entertainment space. And then HP imported me into the US 4 years ago. So a very varied career, but there's a little common thread. All my friends laugh at my varied career, but there is a common thread, and it's always about analyzing information and presenting it, communicating, and the audience varies, so your communication style varies, but it's the same principle regardless of what job I've been doing.
I think it was
I think that's one of the most powerful tools for women, is really to be into the data and presenting impact because that is really a game changer. Anybody can do it as well, and it's really powerful tool, I think.
Yep. Marcie, you want to jump in?
Sure. So I kind of gave you a little bit of background when I was talking prior. I was, my whole plan was to go into the fashion business, to be a buyer, to do all of those things. I started working when I was 16 years old as a patron service representative. And what I found that I was super good at was selling. I could sell, and that was my gift. And so I was working at Paramount. I was the assistant to the head of post-production, both features and television, and they were leaving. They were each going their separate ways, and I was sitting in an office and didn't know whether I was going to have a job when the new head of post walked in. And so I decided to start looking for a job. And to see what that could look like. I knew I didn't want to work at a studio because I felt like I would have more of an impact in service of the studio. And so I was at a dinner. I think I was at the American Heart Association dinner, and there was a man named Jerry Vernig who used to run CFI, which was the oldest laboratory in Los Angeles. And he was a lovely man. And he said to me, you know what, Marcie? There's this company called Hollywood Digital and a guy named Rand Gladden, and they're looking to hire an assistant. I think you'd be perfect for it. So the next day I called Rand, who, by the way, is still my mentor to this day, and took the job. And I'll never forget, I was making $500 a week, and I went up to $800 a week, and I thought I had struck gold. And one of the things that was really great about working at Paramount and in post-production, I had a book of business that I didn't realize I had. I'd known all these associate producers, all these post supervisors. So working in a facility, I already had a Rolodex. So I started dialing for dollars as an assistant, and started working and selling and doing marketing, and really found that I was capable of closing deals. Now at the time, here's the thing, I wasn't technical. So I couldn't explain the workflow or anything, but I could say that we were the best in the business. Not that I understood what that meant, but still at the same time, I could bullshit my way through it. But then high definition came in. And when high definition came in, it was a start state. And what that means is at a start state, everybody's learning at the same time. So no question is a dumb question, right? The editors are learning how to cut in high def. The telecine guys who are transferring film to tape are learning how to do that in high def. The engineers are trying to put it all together, and the salespeople all had to learn at the same time too. So that was the beginning of me really understanding how to simplify technology and selling it, and having people understand what the implications would be when you chose a different workflow over another. So for me, my career was always trying to find the next start state. How do I find the next start state so that I could be a thought leader, so that I could understand it, so that I can simplify it for clients, so that I can then go in and do some of the biggest films and television shows that ever existed? Because I'd get bored. It'd be one thing to sell it. And at this time, I'm a lone wolf, right? So I'm really only focused on me, my sale, the next client that I was going to work with, how much money I could get. It was really about that. And I was a lone wolf for a really long time in my career, about 16 years. And I had just finished Avatar, which was, you know, career high, right? You're working on the biggest film in the world. Nobody had ever done what Jim had done. And I realized I didn't want to do it anymore. After it was over, I was like, I need to do something else. So I parlayed that into being head of sales for a company called Laser Pacific. And that was a VC-backed company. And the whole job was to build the revenue to be sold in 2 years. So I had 2 years to do it. We did it in 18 months, sold it to Technicolor. And then that's how I ended up at Technicolor, head of sales at Technicolor. And then parlayed that into immersive media because, again, a new start state. I really wanted to learn what game engine was. I wanted to learn, you know, how do I infuse the idea of, you know, traditional entertainment finishers, and how do you then take traditional gaming developers and animators and how do you put them together? And that was, you know, that was how I got into immersive. And then, you know, from there was nothing to sell in immersive.
Marcie, before you jump, can I just ask you a question about that?
Sure.
When you did the lab at Technicolor, it was an AR, VR lab. I feel like that made a big impact on our community because it was still very, very, very early on. And I'm just wondering from the ripple effect standpoint, what impact did that have that you made?
So I was asked to run a lab called the Technicolor Experience Center. And I was petrified. To be very honest with you, they wanted me to build it. They wanted me to build the community. They wanted me to be a thought leader. They wanted me to get together all this technology and equipment, make partnerships. Well, first off, I had never built a lab. So how do you build a lab? That's number one. Number two, I had, I was a salesperson. So I needed to find, and the whole concept was you bring people in, you're the tip of the spear, and then you're going to introduce the Mill or MPC, all of the brands under Technicolor, and why it's important for any company wanting to make an immersive piece of content to use our creatives. So I knew that I couldn't necessarily do a great job operationally because I'm not an operations person. I can do it if I had to, but what I knew I had to do was sell something. And so I sold an idea. I sold a thought of community, and I sold in the idea that if you have any questions, if you don't understand something, this is a safe place to come and learn. And so what we did is we set up, thanks to HP. Thank you, Barbara. At the time it was Rick, but HP came in and they built all of our workstations. So we had tons of computers. We got headsets from every major manufacturer, and we just loaded content. And so what we would do is we would have happy hours, lunch hours, and we would take people through experiences and explain the process. And so what it became was a community of people who all wanted to learn in the same start state. And so everybody was learning at the same time. There was no one better than the other. That's the thing with technology. You have to always remain humble, because the minute you get cocky, it'll bite you in the ass. And so that really gave you a stage to be able to walk in and learn. And so that's what we did. And we did it for 3 years, and it was awesome, and it was great. And I met amazing people, obviously, as I sit here on this panel.
But I think what you did is you ended up making a big impact, a huge impact on the community, on the topic. And that is quite commendable. You know what? I want to get into Evercast, where you are today. I don't want to cut you off, but I will have another question about that.
So
thank you for sharing your.
So do you want me to go, or you want to ask another question?
I'm going to ask you another question in a minute about Evercast. Sound good? Okay. Well, we are thinking here about the influence. So you just heard what Marcie did at Technicolor that made a big impact, call it the ripple effect, on the community. And so I was just wondering, Nanea, you were saying earlier how you understood the unconscious bias about women, but in rather being a victim, you decided to be a very strategic business leader. I'm just curious, because you did change the paradigm. But what I'd love to know more about is how you have helped make an impact with other people, showing what you did. And I truly believe that you lead by example. I've seen it, I've experienced it myself. I was just wondering if you could talk about the impact that you've made on other people, men or women.
Well, thank you for that question, actually, because it's something I've been thinking about a lot. I remember when I was at Electronic Arts, after they acquired a mobile game company I ran tech at, a company called Jamdat. We were very early in mobile gaming and very successful in way before iPhone. And I had a very large division handed to me at Electronic Arts. They brought in all these teams together under me to call it EA Online and drive their new digital strategy. And I'm really proud of the work that we did. You know, we transitioned the company from a packaged goods company to enabling in-game transactions. A lot of the stuff that cryptocurrency concepts are built on today, being able to identify a user across products, you know, really some very innovative thinking. But there were a lot of people in that division. I think at the time it was about 450 people. And one day I noticed in a meeting when I walked in, because I had a lot of pressure on me as a business leader at that company, and I was really stressed out, and I walked into the room and I noticed that all of my direct reports just tensed up. And it was in that awareness that I went, wow, like, what is my contribution to these people's lives? And, you know, I knew by looking at sort of our benefits, impact, et cetera, that many of them were going home to at least another person. If not 2 to 3 with kids, etc. And on my daily impact, you talk about ripple effect. Like when I'm stressed out and crappy attitude and pushing that down on my team leads, and they push it down on theirs, and all those people go home, like I have a direct ripple effect on 1,200 people. And I need to be better. Do you know? There's no trying to inspire people to do things out of fear and anxiety was actually a losing condition. And so when I got coaching, I really started to look at, okay, you need to walk the talk here. You need to operate from a place of compassion and kindness. And sometimes, you know, you still have to make the hard calls, like when we had to cut back, but there are ways to do that through just being mindfully considerate of how the other person is going to receive this note, this, you know, notification that their job is no longer going to exist. And it really got me thinking about conscious leadership and how to lead in a different way. I'm not perfect at it, but I think just planting the seed of really thinking about how am I impacting others? Because as you become more and more advanced in your career, the power dynamic favors you. And so the person could be receiving that information, but they're in fear that you won't like them, that their job could be in jeopardy, that they can't take care of their family, and just really being conscientious about how we communicate as business leaders, I think is a huge way to have an impact. And what I found with the company that I'm at now, TRIPP, which is focused on, you know, creating immersive and augmented experiences that are beneficial in nature, that I really have to walk that talk, because I need people on our team feeling a sense of purpose, feeling inspired, because they're making decisions on the product, you know, on how to help people. And I can't do that all on my own. Everybody on our team needs to be coming from that mindset. And my attitude and my leadership sets the tone for it. And if I show up being a jerk, it has a huge ripple effect. And so, you know, what I found though is that as I've gone through different life experiences, I lost my husband 6 years ago to cancer. TRIPP actually is the result of me asking myself, what's the company look like that I want to build, that I want to run? And I wanted to make a difference with my work in a way that was beyond just entertaining people and being a good boss. And but you know, sometimes we show up and we can't always be on our best, right? And best behavior, you know, when it's chemo day and you have to also take your husband to the doctor, or you're watching someone you love fail and you can't fix it, you know. And so also trying to be transparent about that as a leader, so that other people can feel open and comfortable to let us know when they're dealing with something like that, so the community of our work environment and our colleagues can step up. Because I'll tell you, one of the most moving experiences I had was when my husband was dying. That, you know, my team stepped up and said, we got you. You go do what you need to do. We're going to handle it. Nothing's going to fall apart. And, you know, I got to see what kind of leader I had become with that reflected back to me. And, you know, I'm still a work in progress, but And all of us are dealing with things like this. And, we have to help each other. It's a human condition.
Well, you know what I think, and something I learned just recently, actually, I was a lone wolf for most of my career.
Yeah.
And wasn't managing people, and made a conscious decision that I remember someone said, you never know what happens 15 minutes before you have a meeting. You don't know what's happened to that person. You don't know what situation they're in. And it was said a lot for husbands who are coming home to stay-at-home wives, right? Or stay-at-home mothers. The husband comes home, he doesn't understand why the food's not on the table, he doesn't understand why the kids aren't bathed. He has no idea what's transpired 15 minutes before he walked in the door. And so I learned that, and I took that through management. Because here's the thing. I used to think it was okay to be a nice princess. I used to think it was okay not to have feelings. I used to think it was okay to make people feel bad about themselves because they couldn't get a job done. That was the kind of manager I was, until I made the conscious decision to actually become more humane. Because here's the thing, a job is a job is a job is a job. You should not identify as who you are as a manager or who you are as a job. You should identify who you are as a human being. Mm-hmm. And if you can't lead with kindness and happiness and be open and honest with all of the people that are working for you, then you failed as a manager.
Right.
Because the humane side is what people will always remember.
So the thing about this that I never understood is people who had always talked about, oh, I'm a different person at home versus at work. I've never understood that from the beginning of my work career. It's like I spend more time at work with the people I work with than I'd spend with anybody else in the world. I damn well need to like you, and I need you to like me. And again, there's that mantra, isn't there? I'm not paid to be liked.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? You're going to get more out of your team if you are liked.
That's right.
Carol Robin has a wonderful book called Connect, and she's one of my mentors. And she has a whole program on really answering the question of why would anyone follow you? Right? Why would anyone follow you? You can get people to follow you out of fear, but they will not have your back and be there when the hard turnarounds need to happen, right? They will jump ship. So why would anyone follow you into battle? And they have to connect to you authentically as a person. So this whole concept of it's not personal, it's just business. Look, we know too that this has not, with men in business for many years, that attitude has created earlier death than necessary, unhealthy environments. Any man who has a kid who's home sick wants to be home with their child, right? But they're not allowed to show that, or they haven't been. And so I think this is a transition in today's workplace that is so needed. And it doesn't make us soft, right? It makes us stronger, because those are the teams that will show up when the stock's going down and you need to come together and really start bailing the water out fast and patching the boat and getting on new course, right?
I think you guys have come up with our new title for our next webinar called The Conscientious Leader. I would love to find out where we are today with the ripple effect, and is it still working? So we've just kind of looked back through your past experiences, and Marcie, I said we'd love to talk to you more about Evercast and hear about it. You're the CRO today, but I'm just curious, did this position you have today transpire from a ripple effect that you had in your past lives? I don't mean past lives, I mean in your past. And also I want to hear a little bit more about why you've had a year of saying yes.
Yeah, so I left Technicolor in 2019 with the idea of going back into post-production. I didn't know, because I was in immersive, I was completely immersed in immersive. I had created, this entire new community of people that I was around. But I was feeling I was missing something. And I felt what I was missing was post-production, because that was where I started. So it was December 2019. I got a phone call from an editor that I worked with. He was my first inbound cold call looking for telecine on a little film. At the time, I didn't know it was Titanic, but it was a little film called Titanic.
Little film.
And his name is Roger Barton, and he's one of the most well-known editors in Hollywood. And he had been looking for a change for his life. He was constantly on the road, traveling from production to production to production. He ended up divorced, his son not speaking to him because he was never around, and he couldn't make the marriage go because he was always on the road cutting a blockbuster film. So he had made an investment in a company called Evercast, which was an online collaboration tool where you could, in real time, hook any third-party source up to a video conferencing system such as WebEx, and you could stream in real time. What that meant is you didn't have to travel to these far distant locations to sit and wait for the director to come into your room and cut in real time. You could be have talent all over the world and connect to them in real time. So what happened was I had just come home from Technicolor. I'd made the decision I was leaving. All of a sudden I get a ping from Roger and he's like, "What are you doing? I hear you're leaving Technicolor. I made this crazy investment in this startup. What are you doing?" And I had made the decision that 2020 was going to be my year of saying yes.
Where did this come from? You just decided?
My daughter, who's 19 now, used to make me watch these videos called Yes Theory. And people would go all over the world and like say yes, and they'd end up traveling over here and traveling over there, and they were living their best life. So it's like, screw it, let me see what saying yes means. So I talked to Roger. He's like, "We don't know how to sell it. We need someone to form an opinion, a pitch, the whole thing. We have no processes in place." So I said, "Okay, I'll do it. I'll do it 3 times a week. I have this other thing I want to do, but I'll consult for you." Well, then the pandemic hit, and we went from 15 users to now 30,000 people logging in every single day. So the growth was massive and enormous. And I said yes to this small little startup, and it's grown into this massive, fun company of full-blown remote collaboration, a remote company where I've never even stepped into an office.
See, I think what's interesting about that too is with the pandemic and doing a lot more remote production now, you're leading into change and you're creating it. You're driving, you're pioneering.
Definitely building the plane as we're flying.
Which is what you've said all along. You like to do that. And it's wonderful that you're in a place now that you can. So
yeah, thank God, it's great.
I know. I want to go to Barbara for a minute here. I know you recently did the keynote address at the Infinity Festival, and I know you also like to discuss the findings of the research that HP does on megatrends. I'm just wondering how you feel about that, where you are in your life today as far as your career purpose is concerned.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because you're right. In my current role as media and entertainment strategy lead at HP, I do a lot of public speaking. I'm sort of the public face of our media and entertainment side of the business. If I'm honest, I didn't do that much public speaking before this role. I did some kind of somewhat reluctantly. Here, I knew I had to embrace it and get over the nerves. I don't know that you ever get over the nerves, but anyway, fake it. And it was interesting with the mega trends that you mentioned. Like HP, obviously, it's a huge company. There's a lot of great research. And as an economist, I mentioned my background as an economist. I was really fascinated by the research that we were doing over a period of 3 years, looking at the macroeconomic trends that are affecting society, affecting the world, whether that be globalization, urbanization, population growth, economic distribution. All these factors affect companies like HP because they affect the world, they affect our customer base. So when I saw the presentation, the research that we had, and I was being asked to do a presentation at the Advanced Imaging Society, I kind of had that dilemma, like what am I comfortable talking about that will give me confidence that I can do this. And I kind of dug back into my past, my economics background. And so we're talking about the ripple effect, but everything happens and will have far-reaching consequences. And it might not seem at the time that it will be significant or that it will have an impact 30 years later. But that's what gave me the confidence to stand up and present on macroeconomic trends.
Well, you know what's interesting about that, though, is by you doing it, you're going to give other people, the right to do it for themselves, right? You're giving them permission to doing it. We look at you and think, well, maybe we could do that. So I think your ripple effect will live on for a long time.
That could be scary.
Yeah. I'm going to move to Nanea because I'd love for her to tell us a little bit about TRIPP. But what I think is interesting is she went from grief to gratitude, which absolutely played a role in helping her create this business. But she created a business that's in the center of the mindful metaverse. So if you want to talk to us a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Sure, and we can have a completely separate panel.
Yeah, I know we're going to. We have 4 minutes left, so
sure, I'll be mindful of that. Yeah, at TRIPP, we first started off creating these meditative experiences in VRs that really help you feel like you're connecting more deeply to yourself. We've grown very rapidly. I'm really excited about the momentum of the product, but now we're starting to span out into augmented reality. We just announced a big relationship with Niantic to build on top of their Lightship platform. And what we want to do is we're going to change the way the world looks around you and show you the ripple effect of your self-care in a way that connects you to a visual and audio representation of everyone's self-care in the community. And so it's super cool. I'm really excited about it. It's taking this idea of impact and contribution, because a lot of gamification in healthcare apps can actually make you feel worse, right? They're constantly telling you you haven't achieved some mindfulness or enlightenment score, and so you're not good enough the way you are. And what we wanted to do was give our users the opportunity to feel like how we feel when we show up to work every day, that they're making a difference in the world, and that could have a big effect. So we're going to launch this next year. We're building it furiously now. We think of the mindful metaverse as being distributed. So you'll see us also focusing on how to bring mindful communities to different virtual worlds as well that are already up and running. And so I'm really excited about creating this network effect of you take care of yourself and it helps everyone else be better. Kind of like that moment where I was self-aware that I needed to just be better as a person so I could have a better impact on the people around me. Imagine if we can get a whole bunch of people doing that.
Well, I think the ripple effect came from a conversation I had with you, because that's what you're doing right now.
Right. Yeah, it's been really fun.
Yeah. We have 2 minutes left, so I'm just going to ask a quick question, and feel free to go around and answer it if you've got an idea. But love to know, between the three of you, quickly, do you have any advice to anyone in the audience on how to make an impact? I know that's a very big question.
I want to say something because I think it's really, it impacted me just recently. And I want to give this advice because I think it's super important for people to understand. So I had to go from Toronto to Los Angeles. I had to go pick up my daughter's car from Toronto and drive across country. And my friend said to me, who was driving with me, you've got to hear Matthew McConaughey's new book. Let's listen to it on Audible. It's called Green Light. And I was like, I'm not going to listen to this. And she's like, come on, you'll like it. He's really good. And he reads it himself. So I said, okay, I'll listen to it. I was absolutely riveted. And I was riveted because oftentimes in your life, you think that you don't know whether to move forward. You don't know what the signs are. You don't know. And so Green Light by Matthew McConaughey talks about what green lights, red lights, and yellow lights represent in your life. and how you can take a red light and turn it into a green light, and how he did. And to me, it was so impactful because so many times in your life, whether it's your personal life, whether it's your professional life, you feel like you're being blocked. And what was so impactful to me is this gives you the ability to really understand what is truly a red light, what is truly a yellow light, and what is truly a green light.
When you figure it out, will you let us know?
Well, I have. I now talk about it with my kids. Like they're going through something and I'm like, you know what, that's a yellow light. Just slow down,
Good, I like
stop,
that.
and think about it. The red light doesn't mean, it just means stop for a minute. It doesn't mean you're stopping forever. You just may be taking a left turn. And so for me, that is what I'm imparting on everybody. Get the book Green Light. It is actually amazing and an amazing story, but it really impacted me on how I proceed in my everyday life.
And also just say yes, right?
And
Yeah,
just say yes.
I would quickly just
So
say
we're
that
at the top of the hour right now. But go ahead.
We
But-
would like to continue.
I would just say that confidence comes after you take the action. So feel the fear and just do it anyway.
Barbara, what do you say?
I would say do unto others as
Yep.
you would be done to. It's a very simple thing.
Yeah. Well, good. All right. Well, you want to thank you so much for being a part of this today. I hope everyone got out of it as much as I did, and appreciate the prep. And Ashmi, thanks for the marketing materials, and Fabiola, thanks for hosting us, and Sumit, always doing your magic. Everybody have a great day. We'll be back again.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.